Hello, and welcome to the Quiet and Strong podcast, especially for introverts. I'm your host, David Hall, and the creator of quietandstrong.com. This is a weekly podcast dedicated to understanding the strengths and needs of introverts. Introversion is not something to fix, but to be embraced. Normally, we'll air each episode on a Monday. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite platform. So, small talk is a hot topic for introverts. Many introverts don't like small talk, and many don't feel like they're very good at it, and that can definitely cause some anxiety. We are going to get into the why small talk can be a challenge for introverts and how to improve if that's your desire. I've had my own struggles with small talk, and it was overwhelming at times. As I came to understand myself and my introversion, I came to the conclusion that small talk may not be interesting for me for its own sake, as introverts are deep thinkers and may not care to talk about the weather or how delicious food is. However, small talk can be a great tool to build relationships in all aspects of life. As people, all people, introverts, extroverts, need connection and meaningful relationships. And so, small talk can be that road to the deeper conversations introverts enjoy. And sometimes it's okay to talk about the weather or other things. Just, it may be that road to get to that deeper conversation that you want to have and build those relationships. People can definitely get better at small talk with some thought and some practice. And keep in mind that introverts think before we speak and may need some time to think. This is probably why we don't like to walk into a room of 50 strangers and move from person to person and come up with new things to say for each new person in a rapid fire sort of way. And as we're talking, again, remember the differences between introverts and extroverts are not good or bad, just different. And understanding this helps us all use our strengths and honor our needs. So, we may need to walk into that room of 50 strangers, and we can prepare for these type of events and conversations, and we can get better at it. On the other hand, we may be able to adjust, and if I'm in an event like that, I would rather have a couple deep conversations, and maybe I can make that work out. Also, as a side note, really think about getting involved with planning events and consider both introvert and extrovert needs as you do. So, many of us have had a break from small talk this past year. I don't really miss small talk, again, for its own sake, but I do miss the connection. I've definitely felt a sense of isolation this past year, mostly being at home and not getting out too much and being more limited in the number of people that I've had conversations with. There's been a little small talk before the Zoom meeting and after, and this is usually just for a couple minutes. And there's usually actually plenty to talk about as you haven't seen these folks in a long time. And generally after the meeting, there's not a lot of small talk, as usually it's like, all right, meeting's over, see y'all later, unless you ask someone to stay on. In a real meeting, conversations before and after happen more organically. Maybe as you walk back to the office with a colleague. And I do miss these more organic connections. Texts and phone calls with family and friends don't quite replace the feeling of hanging out and having great conversations and doing something together that you enjoy. So, after more than a year of reflection, I am looking forward to getting back to life. Even as an introvert, I've felt a sense of isolation, and I'm looking forward to renewing some of my friendships and making new friendships and making new connections. And definitely, as we're talking today, small talk is a big piece of that. So, how do you feel about small talk, especially as the world's opening up again? I put the following question out there on social media: Introverts, what are your thoughts on small talk? Like it, tolerate it, avoid it, or something else? What strategies do you use for small talk? And thanks for those of you that answered. I got so much out of everybody's responses. Some of the responses you can check out on Quiet and Strong's social media, and then some that I got were in private groups. I will read some excerpts from the different responses that I got. There were plenty that said they didn't like it, and for some it caused anxiety. Again, it's fine if you don't like it. You know, if you're a deep thinker and you really want to have those deep conversations, but I think we, need to have some, and I really want to help us all not feel anxiety when you want to and need to make those connections. So, here's just a few comments of some of the people that said that they really didn't like it. I don't like small talk because it drives me up the wall slightly. Or another one, hate it. Another, don't like it at all. Avoid it as much as possible. Another person said, it doesn't satisfy my deep soul. Also, if they ask me what my plans are for the weekend, what did I do? It annoys me because as an introvert, I'm just happy to be home relaxing and recharging. Yeah, and again, that's another factor there. It's like we know what we like, right? Another person says, I avoid it. I hate it so much. I feel fine talking about the things I know, important things, about my expertise. But talking about nothing is something I avoid. I feel like I need to have meaningful conversations. Another person says, loathe it. Never know what to say and feel so awkward. Get me into a proper topic and I'm fine. The small talk? Ooh. Another person says, not a fan of small talk. I tend to go right in with the topics. I do get strange looks sometimes. I can really relate to this last comment. I've been known to just dismiss with the small talk and just start jumping in with the deeper conversation. And sometimes people are uncomfortable with that. They need a little bit of warm up time. There's nothing wrong with not liking small talk, but hoping that for those that want to have those deeper conversations, that they're able to use that tool of small talk without feeling the anxiety that they might be. And for some, it's situational. Here's a few comments on that. For me, I notice my ability to do small talk is connected to how comfortable I am with myself. The more comfortable I am, the easier it is. I don't find it enjoyable, but can manage it. Another person says, I usually avoid small talk if possible. If I feel connected to the person, then small talk feels easier. And another says, I don't mind small talk, but it really depends what it is. It really doesn't bother me if it's general stuff like weather or something like that. It's when the small talk goes on and on because the other person feels obliged to talk. I can't bear it. Overwhelmingly, a lot of the comments I received, people did see it as the gateway to the deeper conversations they wanted to have. Listen for the ways that people describe the deep stuff. There's a lot of different ways that they phrase that. I thought that was interesting. And again, as in a previous comment, sometimes people need to warm up. So here's a comment. I think you need small talk and chit chat to warm you up. Another person writes, for me, it depends on the relationship I have with the person I'm talking to. and the objective of the conversation. For example, if I'm talking to someone new, I do not mind small talk, as it gives me an opportunity to get to know them better and understand their personality. Another writes, I don't mind small talk as a warm-up to a real conversation, as long as it leads to the juicy, deep, and meaningful stuff. Again, see? Juicy, deep, and meaningful stuff. I love that. So you'll hear the deep conversations phrased in a lot of different ways. And 90% of the time, it's spent on the latter. I find it having a healthy and sincere curiosity about the other person helps with small talk beyond the usual comments about the weather, public transportation, etc. Another person writes, it depends on the person, how the day is going, the situation, and many other factors. I used to work in PR, so I have learned to have full conversations of small talk. It's fine. I can deal. I like that it's a light touch way of learning about someone. But the good stuff comes when small talk is over. Another writes, small talk is okay as small talk, but when you've talked about the small stuff, you need to stop and talk about the big stuff. And again, a lot of people as introverts realize that we need to have the small talk, but it's a way to get to those deeper conversations that we crave and not just talk for the sake of talking. So many shared strategies, including asking questions and having some questions ready. It's helpful to have a few conversational questions ready that you've thought of ahead of time. If you'll be in a situation meeting new people and working a room is not your strong point, try to think of some open-ended questions, not just those that can be answered with yes or no or good or fine, to give the other person an opportunity to speak about himself or herself instead of just having the conversation fall on you. Just remember, pauses in conversation are okay and normal. So don't put too much pressure on yourself. And you can use questions to guide the conversation, to not just stop at the small talk, but to move on to something deeper that you really enjoy. You know, it's funny. You may be able to imagine that I could talk all day about personality, introversion, extroversion, how we can be successful. And, you know, if you're talking to me, don't be surprised if I might try and steer the conversation that way if I think you might be interested. So here's some of the responses on some strategy. For me, it's about having some great questions so I can move it to more meaningful and generative level or move on. I can tolerate a certain amount in order to be able to find a way to connect, but tire easily if it stays small. I'm not a huge fan of small talk. I'd rather get straight to the point and see small talk as a waste of time. However, I'm learning I do need to do it. For example, when welcoming clients, I do a bit of chit-chat about the weather as an alternative to silence. Another person writes, I don't hate it, but I don't seek it out. I try to add enough to keep things pleasant, unless it's on a completely inane subject, in which case I lose interest quickly. My only real strategy is to try to ask questions to keep the other person talking so I don't have to. Another person writes, I don't like small talk, so I try to steer the conversation to another topic by asking questions. Again, you can get to that topic that you're interested in or that you have a mutual interest in. Another person writes, as someone who will take a quick look at the headlines in the morning, I find, did you hear about the latest on? As a good small talk opener. It can lead to deep conversations, but also a good way to assess if they aren't interested. It gives you a lot of new topics if you need to fill the awkward silences. Another person writes, I'm okay with small talk for a short time and prefer it to be one-on-one. It should be short and be a warm-up to an interesting, more engaging conversation. The best conversations are the ones I continue to think about after they're over. I love learning new things. Isn't that it? Like a conversation that was worthwhile is you're gonna think about it later and it's gonna inspire you. Another writes, this is such a fantastic topic for introverts. For one, I'm not a fan of making small talk with people whom I'm only just met in a social situation. I prefer others to talk, listen, pick up on a common area of topical interest, and ask questions that would lead to building up meaningful conversations of depth. Another person writes, I typically have a window period for engaging in small talk, preferring to conserve my energy for the meatier topics of discussion. Small talk periods are also a time for me to pick up on nonverbal cues and read the room. Another person writes, I need to find questions and enable the other participant to talk. This reduces my feeling like it's a rapid fire nowhere conversation, which makes me feel wound up and tired. Often this technique can lead to deeper convos. Perfect. Another writes, I found there are ways to make small talk sound light and inviting. If people stay in platitudes, I let go. But some will be intrigued and reveal a bit more of what's really going on in their life. And then you can have a genuine exchange. Thank you for all the great comments. Hopefully you enjoyed hearing from some fellow introverts that may also have some struggles as you do, and also provide some good strategies. When it comes to connecting with others, here's some additional thoughts I have. It's really important to take an interest in the other person. I know that as an introvert, sometimes I've felt awkward in conversations and have simply answered the questions asked of me. I've learned to turn this around and make the conversation about all involved. This may simply be answering the question I'm asked, but then asking the same question back. If they say, how's work going? I answer, but then I want to hear about their work too. I am trying to make a better effort in remembering the details about people, such as where they live, what they like to do, how many kids they have, etc. So, in making connections with other people, a book I'm a fan of, it's from 1936, so it's an oldie and a classic. It's from Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And in the book, he has 6 principles. It says 6 ways to make people like you. I don't actually like that title. I would rather say the same thing as 6 ways to connect with people, because I'm not looking just to have people like me. I want to make connections with people. So anyway, these 6 principles are great to make connections with people. As we're talking about, genuinely interested in other people. Principle 2, smile. Think about if you're smiling or not. Sometimes as introverts, our expression on our face may not match what's going on in our head. So as we're taking that interest in the other person, be sure to smile and let them know that you are interested. Principle 3, remember that a person's name is to that person the sweetest and most important sound in any language. And, in life, I've probably said, oh, I'm bad with names, but Dale Carnegie really emphasizes the importance of names and taking the time to remember people. And think about it. When someone uses your name, that means, hey, they know me, they see me. And it really is important. And you don't want to overuse people's names, in a creepy kind of way, but you want to acknowledge them. And again, as he says, it's the sweetest and most important sound when they hear their own name, so that they know, hey, this person knows me. Ask them what they want to be called. And make sure you're pronouncing it correctly. And, maybe you don't know the pronunciation of the person's name, but that's fine. Ask them and practice it. Principle 4, be a good listener. Encourage others to talk about themselves. Again, that's part of asking questions. And as we've talked about in previous podcasts, listening isn't just being silent because the other person is talking. It's paying attention to what they're saying and remembering what they're saying and asking questions to find out more. Principle 5, talk in terms of the other person's interest. We can build a lot of great connections this way and make the conversation, really get to know that person. And principle 6 from Dale Carnegie's book, make the other person feel important and do it sincerely. And that's the key. Let them know that you enjoyed the conversation with them. And do it with a smile. As we're having these conversations, remember, a little silence is okay. I think that's what stresses us out as introverts. Introverts and extroverts seem to both be uncomfortable with the silence. Remember that introverts think before we speak. And so sometimes there's going to be a pause in the speaking. And keep in mind that goes for you as an introvert and for your fellow introverts. So let people know when you're taking time to think, hey, give me a moment to think about that. Also remember, if there's silence, you're not the only one. Everybody's being quiet. It's not just you. So don't pressure yourself. Don't pressure yourself to fill every moment with conversation. So sometimes just relax and enjoy the silence. Acknowledge it. Acknowledge when you're thinking. Also, it's important to take a break when you need to. Excuse yourself when you need to. Nonstop conversations can be draining for most introverts. I think this, of course, will vary by introvert, as well as the particular conversation and who the conversation's with. You need to know your limits and have an escape plan when needed. Of course, this could be a trip to the restroom, or to get a drink, or to walk outside. When you do end the conversation, again, express that you enjoyed your time with them. And another thing, be aware of the needs of other introverts. So, any challenges that you have, just realize you can help somebody else with their challenges and their uncomfortableness with small talk. So, while I've come to better understand my own strengths, I remember what it can be like to struggle as an introvert. As I have conversations with other introverts, I try to remember all these concepts that we've talked about. Take an interest in them. Don't worry about the silence. And honor their needs for breaks. You have many great gifts as an introvert, and you do not need to apologize for any of them. You do not need to apologize for who you are. It's okay if you don't enjoy small talk, but by understanding yourself, you can connect with others as you want and need to. I do plenty of small talk. I enjoy some, and I'm tortured by some. And it's also fine if I avoid some. I've gotten so much better at small talk and keeping conversations going, but also getting to that deeper stuff that I want to and need to. It's funny though, sometimes you may be a great conversationalist, but as an introvert, you're often thinking, you may still be considered the quiet one, even though you think you're talking plenty. So here's another comment on small talk that I can really relate to. I suppose I tolerate it mainly. I'm actually quite good at starting the conversation or speaking first in a meeting. It's just something you have to do, really. I often feel it odd to be called the quiet one because of this. Being an introvert, though, I rarely say much off the cuff. I need to be prepared for meetings. Having said that, I'll quite often break the ice at the water dispenser, for example. I think this probably shows that there are many more of us out there than we are prepared to admit. So, yeah, you may still be called the quiet one, even though in your mind you're speaking quite a bit. But as an introvert, you're always going to take time to think and have some quiet moments. And as this comment says, we just need to be prepared. And all this is about relationships. Relationships are important to introverts and extroverts alike. It's a myth that introverts only want to be alone. That's crazy. I've been a lot more isolated this past year, and it's really been a time to think about, okay, what do I really need? And I definitely need some connection. I need connection with those I work with. I need connection with my family, my friends, other people in my community. And it's definitely been lacking. Some of it's been a nice break from small talk, but small talk is an important piece of making connections with others. And when it comes to making relationships, for me as an introvert, working side by side with someone either regularly or on a project, that really works best for me. Meaning it's the easiest setting for me to get to know someone. I've heard this described as building relationships as you roll up your sleeves with someone. But there are times when we need to build a relationship but aren't working closely with a person. Being able to start with small talk has made a big difference for me. So whether you enjoy small talk or not, you can get better at it with a little strategy and genuine interest in others. And also remember to relax. It's just small talk. Thank you so much for joining me. And thank you so much for all of you that commented on my posts. I look forward to further connecting with you. Reach out at david@quietandstrong.com. Check out my website, quietandstrong.com. I'll put the social media channels to the show notes. Please do comment on social media posts related to the podcast. Send me topics or questions that we can address. Send me guests that you want to see. There's so many great things about being an introvert, so we need those things to be understood. Let's keep the conversation going. Get to know your introverted strengths and needs, and be strong.